When paradise is built on deception, awakening becomes the ultimate rebellion. In a deteriorating world, Arcadia offers digital sanctuary, a perfect virtual escape where billions find refuge from environmental collapse. As a senior programmer, Ilara Chen helps build this paradise, believing she serves humanity's survival, until she discovers Arcadia's darkest secret. It doesn't just simulate reality, it harvests human consciousness without consent, transforming users' most intimate experiences into fuel for artificial intelligence. Now, Ilara faces an impossible choice: remain loyal to the system she helped create, or risk everything to expose a truth that would shatter humanity's final sanctuary. In a world where reality itself has become the enemy, the most dangerous act might be seeing clearly, beyond the dome. Chapter 1. The Harvest. The first rule of harvesting was simple: never become attached to the wasteland. Ash Tanner repeated this mantra silently as the armored rover rumbled over the cracked, barren terrain that had once been fertile farmland. Through the vehicle's reinforced windows, the landscape stretched out like a nightmarish painting. Twisted, blackened tree husks reaching toward a sickly yellow sky. Fields of ash interrupted by the occasional ruins of pre-collapsed structures. And in the distance, the ominous wall of an approaching dust storm. "Junction point in 2 kilometers, announced Vera, the rover's AI navigator, her synthesized voice calm against the howling wind outside. "Probability of viable salvage, 63%. Atmospheric toxicity levels rising. Current rating, Class 3. Ash adjusted his harvester suit, checking the seals and oxygen levels out of habit, though the rover's environment was still secure. Class 3 wasn't immediately lethal, but it would corrode exposed equipment and skin within hours. The suit would provide protection for up to 12 hours, more than enough for this expedition. Still, the familiar knot of tension formed in his stomach. Every venture into the wasteland was a calculated risk, and 15 years of experience had taught him that calculations often failed when facing the chaotic reality outside Eden 9's protective dome. "Acknowledge Class 3, he responded, his deep voice carrying the slight rasp that most dome residents developed from the filtered air. "Proceed to junction." Beside him, Elias Chen looked up from his data tablet, eyes narrowed in concentration behind protective goggles. Younger than Ash by nearly a decade, this was only his 8th expedition. But he'd already proven himself a skilled technician with an uncanny ability to identify valuable salvage. "Archive databases suggest this was once a medical research facility," Elias said, swiping through deteriorating schematics on his screen. "Pre-collapse, privatized, likely affiliated with the old government's emergency response division. If we're lucky, there might be preserved pharmaceutical compounds or medical equipment the conservatory doesn't have cataloged yet." Ash nodded, but kept his excitement in check. "If we're lucky," was the operative phrase in the wasteland. The maps were often wrong. Buildings rarely stood as they were depicted in the archives, and sometimes the most promising sites held nothing but dust and broken dreams. The second rule of harvesting: expect nothing, appreciate everything. The rover crested a small rise, and the junction point came into view. A partially collapsed complex of buildings surrounded by a deteriorating security fence. Once, the facility might have been impressive with its modernist architecture and sprawling layout. Now it was just another graveyard of the old world, half buried under decades of accumulated soil and ash. Structural integrity analysis suggests the southwestern quadrant remains most intact, Vira reported, projecting a 3-dimensional rendering of the complex onto the rover's front display. "Subterranean levels detected but status unknown. Recommend primary entry through loading dock area." "Concur," Ash replied, already mentally plotting their approach. "Elias, standard protocol, 90-minute maximum exposure this run." He turned to the third member of their team, who had been silently monitoring communications equipment in the rover's rear compartment. "Riya, maintain position here unless instructed otherwise. If that storm accelerates, don't wait for us." Riya Patel nodded, her dark eyes serious behind her glasses. As their communication specialist and emergency extraction pilot, She was their lifeline if things went wrong. I'm tracking the storm front. Current trajectory gives you approximately 2 hours before it reaches this position, but I'll call it at 90 minutes to be safe. Good. Ash began the methodical process of fully sealing his harvester suit, the familiar routine calming his nerves. The sleek white and gray exosuit represented the pinnacle of Eden 9's protective technology. Lightweight carbon fiber composites reinforced with impact-resistant panels, integrated air filtration and climate control, and a heads-up display that would provide constant environmental data. Once sealed, he ran through the standard systems check, watching the suit's diagnostics flash green across his HUD. Oxygen reserves, 14 hours. Power cells, fully charged. Communications, linked to both the rover and Eden 9's long-range network. Biomonitors, active and transmitting. Elias mirrored his preparations with the efficiency of someone who had drilled these procedures hundreds of times in simulation. Despite his relative inexperience in the field, his technical training was impeccable, a product of Eden 9's rigorous education system that identified potential harvesters early and molded them for their future roles. Suit integrity confirmed, Elias reported, his voice slightly altered by his helmet's audio system. All systems optimal. Ash performed a final visual inspection of his partner's suit before giving a satisfied nod. Let's make this quick and clean. Standard sweep pattern, room by room. Priority items first, curiosities second, nothing unnecessary. They moved to the rover's airlock, waiting as the system cycled through its decontamination sequence, a fine mist of neutralizing agents designed to eliminate any lingering biological or chemical hazards before outer door deployment. The third rule of harvesting: contamination kills more than catastrophe. When the airlock's exterior door finally slid open, the full sensory impact of the wasteland hit them despite their suit's protection. The howl of toxic wind, carrying the gritty particulate that scoured exposed surfaces raw. The oppressive weight of the contaminated atmosphere pressing against their suits. The sickly yellow-gray light filtering through layers of atmospheric pollution. "Comms check," Ash said, taking his first steps onto the blasted landscape. "Reading you 5 by 5. Riya's voice confirmed through his helmet speakers. "Same here," added Elias, moving up beside him with the careful gait of someone acutely aware of their suit's limitations. They advanced toward the facility and practiced tandem, energy rifles held at ready position, not from expectation of human threats, but as a precaution against the occasional mutated wildlife that had adapted to the toxic environment. The wasteland had its own brutal ecosystem now, one that regarded humans as either prey or territorial invaders. As they approached the perimeter fence, Ash noted the faded hazard warnings and security notifications still visible despite decades of exposure. Restricted area, biohazard level 4 facility, and unauthorized entry prohibited under federal law. Meaningless declarations from a government that no longer existed, protecting secrets that had lost their value when civilization collapsed. The loading dock was partially obstructed by debris, but they found a service entrance nearby that yielded to their cutting tools after several minutes of careful work. Throughout the process, Ash maintained constant awareness of their environment, both through direct observation and the stream of data flowing across his HUD. Toxicity levels, radiation readings, structural integrity scans. The information that meant the difference between a successful harvest and becoming another statistic in Eden 9's memorial database. "Breaching interior environment," he reported, as the door finally gave way. "Initial readings show minimal air circulation. Toxicity levels lower than exterior, but still Class 2. Proceeding with caution." The facility's interior greeted them with absolute darkness, broken only by the powerful beams of their suit lights. The air hung heavy with decades of undisturbed dust, swirling in luminous clouds as they moved carefully through what appeared to be a security checkpoint. Skeletal remains were still visible behind the reception desk. Someone who had either chosen to remain at their post during the collapse or had been unable to evacuate in time. Ash had seen countless similar remains over his career, but they never failed to evoke a moment of solemn reflection. This had been a person with hopes, fears, relationships, all reduced to anonymous bones in a forgotten building. This was the true legacy of the collapse. Not just environmental devastation, but the sudden, brutal erasure of individual human stories. "Let's start with the administrative section," he directed, pulling his focus back to the task at hand. "Might find facility maps or inventory records to guide our search." They moved methodically through deteriorating corridors, their suit lights illuminating scenes frozen in time. Offices abandoned mid-workday, break rooms with ancient vending machines, walls still adorned with faded photographs and corporate motivational posters that now seem darkly ironic. Building tomorrow's health solutions today and committed to a sustainable future. Elias located a server room and connected his specialized retrieval equipment to what remained of the facility's computer infrastructure. Despite the advanced decay, Eden 9's technology could often extract fragments of data from systems that had been dormant for decades. "Getting something," he murmured, watching as corrupted files slowly transferred to his secure storage device. "Mostly administrative records, some research abstracts. Wait," his voice sharpened with interest. "Ash, I'm seeing references to Project Lazarus throughout these files. Classified research, high-priority government funding." "Lazarus," Ash repeated, something triggering in his memory. "That was one of the pre-collapse initiatives addressing environmental remediation, wasn't it? Focused on reversing desertification and atmospheric toxicity." "Among other things," Elias confirmed, still scanning the fragmented data. "This facility appears to have been working on the biological component. Engineered microorganisms designed to accelerate soil detoxification and restore damaged ecosystems. If any of their research samples survived." He didn't need to complete the thought. Both knew the value of such a find. Eden 9's conservatory had been attempting to develop similar solutions for generations with limited success. Any preserved research, even failed experiments, could potentially advance their work by years. "Priority shift," Ash decided immediately. "We find the research labs. Everything else is secondary." They continued deeper into the facility, following fragmentary directions extracted from the corrupted server data. The building's layout became more complex as they progressed. Security checkpoints multiplied, and the signage indicated increasingly restricted access areas. Their first significant discovery came in what appeared to be a long-term storage vault, its reinforced door hanging partially open due to power failure during the collapse. Inside, temperature-controlled storage units lined the walls, most compromised by decades without power, but a few, designed with independent backup systems, still showing faint indicator lights. Elias immediately began examining the functional units, connecting his equipment to interface with their ancient control systems. 3 viable storage containers, he reported after several tense minutes. Contents appear to be biological samples in suspended animation. Can't identify specifics without proper analysis equipment, but the preservation protocol matches what would have been used for engineered microbial specimens. "Can we transport safely?" Ash asked, already considering the logistical challenges. "I believe so. The containment units have their own power supplies, primitive by our standards, but designed for durability. If we can extract the entire units, rather than just the samples, we should be able to maintain whatever stasis field they're generating." Ash made a quick calculation. The storage units were bulky, but manageable with their suit's enhanced strength capabilities. "Tag them for extraction. We'll collect on our way out if nothing higher priority emerges." As they continued their exploration, the facility revealed itself to be larger than initial scans had suggested, with extensive laboratory spaces in varying states of decay. Most had been thoroughly compromised by time and the elements entering through structural breaches, but occasionally they found sealed rooms where equipment and materials remained relatively intact. In one such laboratory, they discovered something unexpected, a sealed glass enclosure containing what appeared to be living plants. Improbably, a small ecosystem had survived, protected by some combination of advanced technology and sheer chance. Delicate ferns and small flowering plants grew under artificial lighting that had somehow maintained power for decades. "How is this possible?" Elias whispered, his scientific discipline momentarily overcome by wonder. Ash studied the enclosure's control panel, noting the sophisticated life support systems and power management interface. Looks like an experimental self-contained ecosystem. Must have had incredibly efficient power recycling. He checked his chronometer. Document thoroughly, but we can't extract this intact. Take sample cuttings according to conservatory protocol. While Elias carefully collected plant specimens following the precisely defined preservation procedures, Ash continued examining the laboratory. His attention was drawn to a heavy security door at the rear of the room, its access panel still faintly illuminated despite the decades without maintenance. "Viera, analyze this security system," he instructed, allowing his suit's sensors to transmit data back to the AI in their rover. After a brief analysis, Viera responded, "System appears to operate on an independent power source. Security protocol identified as military grade, circa 2042. Attempting bypass." Several tense minutes passed as Viera worked through the ancient security algorithms. Finally, the panel flashed green, and the heavy door slid open with a hydraulic hiss that spoke to remarkably preserved mechanics. Beyond lay what was clearly the facility's primary research laboratory. A vast space filled with advanced equipment, much of it unfamiliar even to Ash's experienced eye. Unlike the rest of the facility, this area showed signs of deliberate preparation for long-term abandonment. Equipment had been carefully covered with protective materials, data storage devices secured in specialized containers, and most intriguingly, a central platform held what appeared to be a sophisticated stasis chamber. "Elias!" Ash called, his voice revealing unusual urgency. "I need you in here!" The younger harvester joined him quickly, falling silent as he took in the preserved laboratory. His scientific training immediately engaged as he moved from station to station, examining equipment and checking sealed containers. "This is incredible," he finally said. "This lab was purposefully preserved, not just abandoned. Someone wanted this research saved." He gestured toward a sealed case containing what appeared to be multiple data storage devices. These could contain complete research records, not just fragments. Ash nodded, but his attention remained fixed on the central stasis chamber. Unlike the smaller storage units they'd found earlier, this was clearly designed for something much larger than microbial samples. Its control panel displayed active status indicators, power levels, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be vital sign monitoring. "Elias," he said carefully, "I think there's something alive in there." The younger harvester moved to his side, examining the stasis chamber with growing amazement. "These they're biological monitors for a large organism, and they're active." He looked up at Ash, his expression hidden behind his helmet visor, but his voice betraying his shock. "Ash, I think there's a person in there." It was impossible, or should have been. No one had survived outside the domes for extended periods after the collapse, certainly not for decades in suspended animation. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The chamber's readings indicated stable life signs, carefully maintained through an unimaginable feat of engineering. "We need to contact Eden 9 immediately," Elias insisted, already connecting his equipment to the stasis chamber's interface. "This goes beyond our standard protocols." Ash nodded, tapping his communication controls. "Riya, priority transmission to Eden 9 control. We've discovered a maintained stasis chamber with what appears to be a living human subject, requesting immediate guidance." There was a brief pause before Riya responded, her voice tense. "Transmission sent, but Ash, we've got another problem. That storm has accelerated significantly. New calculations put it reaching our position in under 30 minutes, not 90. We need to extract soon." Ash glanced at Elias, who was deeply engaged in downloading data from the stasis chamber's systems. "How long do you need?" 15 minutes minimum, Elias replied without looking up. "There's too much critical data here to abandon." "Riya, prep the rover for emergency departure. We'll head back in 15, storm or no storm." He turned back to Elias. "Focus on the essential data first. If we need to leave in a hurry, I want to make sure we've got the core research at minimum." While Elias worked frantically to extract data, Ash conducted a more thorough examination of the laboratory, gathering samples and documenting everything through his suit's recording systems. Whatever this facility had been working on, it was far more advanced than anything he'd encountered in 15 years of harvesting. 10 minutes into their accelerated timeline, their communications crackled with an incoming transmission from Eden 9. The voice of Director Kane, head of the Resource Acquisition Division and Ash's direct superior, filled their helmets. "Harvester Tanner, your discovery has been escalated to Alpha priority," the director stated without preamble, his clipped tones betraying unusual tension. "You are instructed to secure the stasis chamber for immediate transport back to Eden 9. A special extraction team is being dispatched to your coordinates with appropriate equipment." Ash frowned at the impracticality of the order. "Sir, with respect, the approaching storm makes waiting for an extraction team extremely high risk. The chamber appears to be integrated with the facility's systems. Removing it without proper preparation could compromise whatever or whoever is inside." "Your concerns are noted, Harvester," Director Kane replied, his tone making it clear this was not a point for debate. "But this directive comes from the Governing Council itself. You will secure the laboratory, protect the stasis chamber, and await the extraction team. They are already en route with specialized equipment and will reach your position in approximately 2 hours. 2 hours. Well after the storm would hit their position at full force." Ash exchanged a glance with Elias, though their expressions remained hidden behind their visors. "Sir," Ash tried again, "the atmospheric conditions are considered an acceptable risk given the potential significance of your discovery," Kane interrupted. "Your rover is rated for Class 4 storm conditions. You will shelter in place. The extraction team has been equipped with vehicles capable of operating in Class 5. These orders are non-negotiable, Harvester Tanner." A cold feeling settled in Ash's stomach that had nothing to do with his suit's temperature regulation. In 15 years, he had never been ordered to remain in the wasteland during a major storm event. The risk assessment protocols were absolute on this point. No discovery was worth deliberately exposing personnel to such danger. "Acknowledged, Director," he responded, his training overriding his misgivings. "We'll secure the laboratory and await extraction." When the communication ended, Elias turned to him. "They're really making us stay through a Class 4 storm for this? What could possibly be so important?" "I don't know," Ash admitted, "but orders are orders." "Riya," he called over their shared channel. "You heard all that?" "Every word," she confirmed, tension evident in her voice. "I'm securing the rover for sustained operation under storm conditions." "But Ash, the weather modeling suggests this might peak at Class 5, not 4. We've never tested these vehicles under those conditions outside simulation." "Understood. Continue preparation and maintain constant communication." He turned back to Elias. "Change of plans. Download everything you can from these systems. If we're being ordered to wait out a potentially Class 5 storm, I want to know exactly what we're risking our lives for." They worked with renewed urgency, Elias focusing on extracting research data, while Ash gathered physical samples and secured them according to hazardous material protocols. As they worked, Ash couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The Governing Council of Eden 9 was known for its rational, methodical approach to resource management and risk assessment. For them to issue such an order, overriding standard safety protocols, the contents of this stasis chamber must be of unprecedented value or threat. The fourth rule of harvesting, one not found in any official manual. When the rules change suddenly, prepare for danger. 40 minutes later, the storm hit. Even within the reinforced structure of the facility, they could feel its power, the howling wind that made the walls vibrate, the darkness that descended as thick clouds of toxic dust blotted out what little sunlight had penetrated the polluted atmosphere. "Rover status," Ash requested, trying to keep the concern from his voice. "Holding steady," Riya reported. "External sensors are compromised by particulate density, but the structural integrity remains unaffected. Internal environment stable," she paused. "Ash, I'm detecting vehicle movement approximately 20 kilometers out, heading in our direction. Given the storm conditions, it must be the extraction team." "Already?" Elias questioned. "Director Kane said 2 hours." "They must have been dispatched before they even contacted us," Ash realized, the implications troubling. "Which means whatever we found was already on their radar somehow." The revelation added to Ash's growing suspicion that there was more to this situation than a simple, lucky discovery. Had they been deliberately directed to this facility? Was the junction point identification by Eden 9's mapping systems truly based on probability algorithms? Or had someone intentionally flagged this location? "Elias, what are you finding in that data?" he asked, moving closer to where the younger harvester was still connected to the laboratory systems. "It's extraordinary," Elias replied, his voice hushed despite their private communication channel. Project Lazarus wasn't just about environmental remediation. That was the public-facing research. The classified work was focused on human adaptation to post-collapse conditions. He looked up from his display. They were developing biological modifications to allow humans to survive in the toxic environment, not just with external protection like our suits, but through genetic engineering. The implications were staggering. Eden 9, like all the surviving domes, operated on the fundamental premise that human life was no longer sustainable outside controlled environments. The entire social structure, resource allocation system, and governance model were built around managing an enclosed population with limited expansion capability. If humans could be modified to survive in the wasteland. "The subject in stasis," Ash said slowly. "A test subject?" Elias nodded. "According to these records, yes. One of the lead scientists on the project, Dr. Isabel Reeves. When the collapse accelerated and evacuation orders came, she apparently volunteered to undergo the experimental procedure and enter stasis. The goal was to determine long-term viability of the modifications." He paused, checking additional files. "Ash, these records indicate the stasis chamber was designed to maintain her for 50 years before automatic revival. That time would have elapsed approximately 7 months ago. So, why is she still in stasis? I don't know. Maybe the revival sequence failed, or maybe..." Elias trailed off, clearly reluctant to voice his suspicion. "Maybe someone from Eden 9 has been monitoring this facility all along," Ash finished for him, "and deliberately left her in stasis until they were ready to retrieve her." The idea was disturbing on multiple levels. If true, it suggested a level of deception by Eden 9's leadership that contradicted everything Ash had been taught about the Dome's founding principles and governance ethics. Before they could discuss further, Riya's voice broke in with increased urgency. "Ash, those vehicles are now 10 kilometers out and approaching rapidly despite storm conditions. But there's something else. I'm detecting additional movement from the west. Multiple signals, smaller than vehicles, moving in a pattern consistent with human or humanoid motion." "That's impossible," Ash replied automatically. "Nothing human could survive exposure in a Class 4 storm, even in harvester suits." Nevertheless, that's what the sensors are showing. 8 to 10 human-sized heat signatures, moving in a coordinated pattern toward this facility. ETA approximately 20 minutes, assuming they maintain current speed. Ash felt his training kick in, pushing aside philosophical questions in favor of immediate tactical considerations. "Elias, wrap it up. Grab what you can and prepare to move. Riya, continue monitoring both approaches. If those are humans moving through a Class 4 storm without vehicle protection, they're either extremely well equipped or..." He didn't complete the sentence, but the implication hung in the air between them. "Or they've been modified to survive in these conditions, like the woman in the stasis chamber might have been." 5 minutes, Elias promised, disconnecting various devices and securing sample containers. "I've got the core research data and enough biological samples for the conservatory to analyze." Ash moved to the stasis chamber, studying its control interface more carefully. If they needed to defend this position, he wanted to understand exactly what they were protecting. The readouts continued to show stable life signs, but he noticed something he'd overlooked initially: an active communication module, transmitting data on a frequency that didn't match any standard Eden 9 protocol. "Elias, the stasis chamber is transmitting data. Can you determine where it's sending information?" The younger harvester quickly connected his analysis equipment to the communication module. "It's broadcasting on an encrypted frequency, but the transmission pattern suggests it's not directed at Eden 9. The signal is being bounced between multiple relay points spread throughout the wasteland." "Which means someone else knows about Dr. Reeves," Ash concluded, "and has been monitoring her condition." possibly the same people approaching from the west. The revelation forced a rapid reassessment of their situation. What had seemed like a straightforward, if unusually high priority, discovery was quickly revealing itself to be something far more complex, potentially a flashpoint between competing interests they didn't fully understand. Ash, Riya's voice cut through his thoughts. The extraction team from Eden 9 has accelerated. New ETA 12 minutes. The Western group continues to approach as well. Current projections have both groups arriving at the facility within minutes of each other. The fifth rule of harvesting. The one every experienced harvester learned but never spoke aloud. When caught between unknown forces, protect your team first, your mission second, and Eden 9's interests third. Change of plans, Ash decided. Elias, finish securing those samples. Riya, bring the rover as close to the facility entrance as possible. We're extracting immediately with what we have. We'll rendezvous with the Eden 9 team en route rather than waiting for potential conflict here. What about the stasis chamber? Elias asked, already packing his equipment. We can't move it safely without specialized equipment, Ash replied. We'll provide the extraction team with our coordinates and findings. Whatever happens to Dr. Reeves will have to be their responsibility. They moved quickly to finalize their preparations, securing samples and data storage devices in specialized containment units designed to withstand the harsh conditions of wasteland transport. Throughout, Ash continued to monitor both approaching groups through Riya's sensor updates, his tactical training automatically calculating potential scenarios and response options. As they prepared to leave the laboratory, Elias paused at the stasis chamber one final time. Ash, I don't feel right about this. If we leave her and those people from the west reach her first, we don't know their intentions, Ash reminded him. They could be allies. They could be the ones who've been monitoring her all along. Or they could be scavengers who will destroy decades of research without understanding its significance, Elias countered, his scientific passion overriding his usual deference to Ash's experience. This could be the most important discovery since the founding of the domes, and we're abandoning it. Ash understood the younger man's conflict. Eden 9's educational system instilled both strong loyalty and a deep commitment to the advancement of human knowledge, values now in direct competition given their current circumstances. We're not abandoning the discovery, Ash clarified. We're taking the research data and samples, which contain the scientific value. Dr. Reeves, he looked at the stasis chamber, a rare moment of uncertainty crossing his mind. Director Kane and the extraction team know her significance. They'll handle it appropriately. Even as he said it, Ash wasn't entirely convinced. The unusual nature of the director's orders, combined with the existence of another group apparently knowledgeable about and interested in Dr. Reeves, suggested complexities beyond his understanding of Eden 9's governance and priorities. But his first responsibility was to his team, and remaining in the facility with two potentially competing forces converging on their position was tactically unsound, regardless of the value of their discovery. Final preparations complete, he reported to Riya. We're moving to extraction point now. They carefully navigated through the facility toward the entrance where they had first breached the building. The storm's fury was fully evident now. Even within the structure, the howling of toxic wind penetrating through damaged sections of the building. The intermittent shaking as particularly powerful gusts battered the weakened walls. The absolute darkness beyond their suit lights as the storm blotted out all natural illumination. When they reached the entrance, Riya's voice came through their comms with increased urgency. Rover in position, but visibility is near zero. I'm activating the guidance beacon. Follow it precisely. There's significant debris being thrown by the wind. Ash checked his HUD, confirming the beacon signal. Acknowledged. We're proceeding now. He turned to Elias. Stay exactly 3 meters behind me. No deviations. If you lose visual contact, freeze and report immediately. With that final instruction, they stepped out into the maelstrom. The storm's impact was immediate and overwhelming, despite their advanced harvester suits. The force of the wind nearly knocked them off their feet. Visibility was reduced to mere meters, their headlamps illuminating only a churning wall of dust and debris. The toxic particles in the air created an electrical effect, occasional flashes of static electricity illuminating the darkness in brief, disorienting bursts. They moved carefully toward the beacon, fighting against the wind with each step. Ash maintained constant communication, providing updates on their position and checking Elias's status every few seconds. The younger harvester responded professionally, but Ash could hear the strain in his voice. Few Dome residents, even trained harvesters, had ever experienced a Class 4 storm directly. The psychological impact could be as challenging as the physical danger. They had covered approximately half the distance to the rover when Riya's warning came through their comms. Multiple contacts converging on your position. Eden 9 extraction team from the east, unknown group from the west, both within 1 kilometer and closing rapidly. Ash made an instant decision. Accelerate pace. Get to the rover immediately. They abandoned caution for speed, pushing their suit stability systems to their limits as they moved more quickly through the storm. The rover's form gradually materialized through the swirling dust, a hulking shadow with navigation lights barely visible through the particulate density. As they reached the vehicle, the airlock door slid open automatically, ready to receive them. Ash ensured Elias entered first, then followed, the door sealing behind them as the decontamination sequence initiated automatically. Inside the airlock, they endured the necessary decontamination process with barely contained impatience, watching through the small reinforced window as 2 distinct groups of lights approached through the storm. The orderly, powerful beams of what must be the Eden 9 extraction team from the east, and a more scattered, varied pattern of illumination from the west. When the inner door finally opened, they burst into the rover's main compartment where Riya sat at the controls, her attention focused on multiple sensor displays. Eden 9 team is hailing us, she reported immediately. Director Kane himself is leading the extraction. He's ordering us to hold position and prepare to transfer our findings. Ash moved quickly to the communication station. Put him through. Director Kane's voice filled the cabin, the usual composure replaced by unmistakable urgency. Harvester Tanner, we've detected your movement away from the facility. Explain yourself. Sir, we secured research data and biological samples as instructed, but determined that remaining at the facility presented unnecessary risk given the approaching storm and the detection of an unidentified group approaching from the west, Ash reported formally, though his unease continued to grow. Return to the facility immediately, Kane ordered. The unidentified group is known to us, wasteland scavengers who've been tracking this facility. They cannot be allowed to access the stasis chamber or its occupant. Ash hesitated, processing this new information. Sir, with respect, our protocols explicitly prohibit engaging in potential conflict scenarios during harvest operations. If these scavengers represent a security threat, that falls under Defense Division jurisdiction, not resource acquisition. Circumstances have changed, Harvester, Kane replied, his tone hardening. This is now a Priority Omega situation. That designation supersedes standard jurisdictional boundaries, as you well know. Priority Omega. In 15 years as a harvester, Ash had never heard the designation used outside of theoretical training scenarios. It represented the highest possible priority level, invoking emergency powers for Eden 9's leadership and suspending normal operational constraints. Understood, Director, he responded automatically, years of training overriding his growing concerns. We'll return to the facility and secure the laboratory until your team arrives. As the communication ended, Elias looked at him with clear apprehension. Ash, what's going on? Why would wasteland scavengers even know about this facility, let alone have the capability to approach during a Class 4 storm? It was the right question, one of many that Ash couldn't answer. The situation was evolving beyond the parameters of any scenario he'd encountered in his career, with implications he couldn't fully grasp. We follow orders, he stated simply, falling back on the foundation of Eden 9's social contract. The domes had survived the collapse because of structure, hierarchy, and clear chains of command. Individual uncertainty couldn't be allowed to compromise collective security, particularly in potential Priority Omega situations. Yet even as he gave the instruction to return to the facility, Ash couldn't suppress a fundamental question that had never before entered his mind during a harvest operation. What if Eden 9's interests didn't align with the greater good of humanity's survival? It was a dangerous thought, one that contradicted his lifelong training and belief system. But as they navigated the rover back toward the facility through the raging storm, preparing to secure a decades-old stasis chamber containing a scientist who might have discovered how to adapt humans to the wasteland, Ash couldn't shake the feeling that he was witnessing the collision of competing visions for humanity's future, and he had just been ordered to take a side without understanding the full implications of his choice. The sixth rule of harvesting, unwritten but understood by all who survived long enough. When certainty crumbles, trust your instincts. And Ash's instincts were screaming that something about this situation was fundamentally wrong. The rover reached the facility just as the first members of the Eden 9 extraction team arrived. 6 figures in specialized storm armor, carrying what appeared to be advanced weaponry rather than standard harvesting equipment. They moved with the coordinated precision of military training, not resource acquisition specialists, confirming Ash's suspicion that this operation had always been about more than simple salvage. As Ash and Elias prepared to exit the rover once more, Director Kane himself approached, his imposing figure unmistakable even through the storm. Unlike the others, his armor bore the distinctive insignia of Eden 9's governing council, a position of authority far beyond what would normally be present on a field operation. Harvester Tanner, Kane's voice came through their communication channel. You and your team will remain in your vehicle. We'll handle the extraction from here. The order contradicted the previous instruction to return and secure the laboratory, increasing Ash's sense that the situation was not what it appeared. Sir, we're familiar with the facility layout and the stasis chamber interface. We can assist. That won't be necessary, Kane interrupted. Your team has fulfilled its function by locating the subject. Security concerns now take precedence. Ash exchanged a glance with Elias, whose expression behind his visor revealed similar confusion and concern. Before either could respond, however, Riya's voice cut through their private channel. Western Group has reached the facility perimeter. Multiple entries detected through damaged sections on the northwestern side. Almost simultaneously, one of Kane's team reported the same information. The director immediately shifted to combat stance, his weapon raised. Secure the target, he ordered his team. Lethal force authorized. The abrupt escalation to lethal engagement protocols sent a shock through Ash's system. Eden 9's founding charter explicitly prohibited lethal force except in direct defense of the dome itself. For it to be authorized in a wasteland operation against unidentified individuals who had not yet demonstrated hostile intent represented a fundamental violation of the principles upon which their society was built. Director, request clarification on engagement protocol, Ash stated formally, invoking his right as a senior harvester to question potentially charter-violating orders. Unidentified doesn't automatically mean hostile. We have no confirmation these individuals pose a direct threat. Your concern is noted, Harvester, Kane responded coldly. But the authorization comes directly from the full governing council. These individuals are confirmed hostiles with knowledge of and interest in Project Lazarus. They cannot be allowed to interfere. Before Ash could press further, the situation exploded into chaos. From multiple entry points around the facility, figures emerged through the storm. Human figures in what appeared to be modified environmental suits, moving with a confidence that defied the raging conditions around them. Kane's team immediately opened fire, energy weapons illuminating the storm-darkened landscape with brilliant pulses of destructive force. Several of the approaching figures fell, but others returned fire with weapons of their own, creating a chaotic battlefield around the facility entrance. Get down! Ash shouted, pulling Elias away from the rover's viewport as energy blasts struck nearby, the vehicle's shields absorbing the impact but flaring with the strain. We need to move, Riya called from the control station. We're in the middle of a combat zone. Ash agreed, but their options were limited. Moving the rover would mean navigating through active weapons fire in near-zero visibility conditions. Remaining stationary made them potential collateral damage in a conflict they didn't understand. The decision was made for them when the rover's rear section suddenly breached, the airlock door blown inward by what must have been a focused explosive charge. Through the swirling toxic air that immediately began flooding the compartment, 3 figures entered, their environmental suits unlike anything Ash had seen before. more like second skins than the bulky protective gear used by Eden 9. Ash reached for his energy rifle, but froze when the lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a human face exposed directly to the toxic atmosphere. A woman breathing the unfiltered air of the wasteland without any apparent distress. "We don't have time for this," she said, her voice clear despite the howling wind now whipping through the breached rover. "You have two choices, Harvester. Help us secure Isabel Reeves, or stay here and become part of whatever cover story Eden 9 creates for this operation. Decide now." Ash stared at the woman, his mind struggling to process the impossible reality before him. A human surviving direct exposure to Class 4 toxic conditions without protection. It violated everything he had been taught about post-collapse biology, everything upon which Dome society was structured. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his rifle still half raised. "Someone who knows the truth about Project Lazarus, about what your precious Dome has been hiding for generations." She glanced toward the ongoing firefight outside. "Kane and his team aren't here to salvage research. They're here to ensure it never reaches the public. Now, choose." The seventh rule of harvesting, the one Ash had created for himself after years in the field. When all certainties fail, choose life over doctrine. "What do you need us to do?" he asked, lowering his weapon. The woman nodded, a grim satisfaction in her expression. "Help us reach the stasis chamber. Your authorization codes will bypass security faster than our override methods. We extract Dr. Reeves. You get answers to questions you didn't even know to ask." Ash looked at Elias and Riya, seeing his own shock and indecision mirrored in their expressions. Everything about this situation contradicted their training, their understanding of the world, and their loyalty to Eden 9. But the evidence before them, a woman breathing toxic air, Director Kane authorizing lethal force without provocation, the existence of a decades-old stasis project unknown to the public, suggested their understanding had been incomplete at best, deliberately falsified at worst. "We'll help you reach the chamber," Ash decided, speaking for his team, though he could see both Elias and Riya nodding in agreement. "But I want your word that my team won't be harmed." "You have it," the woman replied, replacing her helmet as two more of her companions entered through the breached airlock. "I'm Sarah. These are Marcus and Juno. Time to discover what your Dome doesn't want you to know about the world outside." As they prepared to exit the rover and make their way back into the facility, navigating between the ongoing firefight and the raging storm, Ash couldn't shake the feeling that this decision marked not just a deviation from protocol, but a fundamental turning point in his understanding of the world. One from which there would be no return to the comfortable certainties of life in Eden 9. The wasteland had always been a place of danger and discovery. But for the first time in his career as a harvester, Ash suspected the most significant discoveries would not be technologies or resources to sustain the Dome, but truths that might fundamentally challenge its very existence. And as they moved through the storm toward the unknown future represented by Dr. Isabel Reeves and her decades-old research, Ash created a new rule for himself, perhaps the most important one yet. When the foundations of your world prove false, have the courage to rebuild on truth, no matter how harsh it might be. If you've enjoyed this first chapter of Beyond the Dome, don't forget to like and subscribe for updates on the upcoming chapters. What secrets do you think Dr. Reeves holds about surviving in the wasteland? Is Eden 9 trying to protect humanity or control it? Share your theories in the comments below.